Ba, 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 ba. Hey, kia ora, Helen Brahms here, coming to you live from Surprise in Arizona. Hope you're having a super fantastic sparkling day. Welcome to Before the Dirt Nap podcast number 1660, Trips Within Trips. I figured I came across this article today. It's called, and it was talking about doing trips within a trip. And I also thought, that would be a really cool topic to talk about this evening. Yay. So here we are on a Friday. I know I sometimes do finish at Fridays, but today we're talking something completely different because it is something that's really different and it's really cool. If you can work it into your schedule, it is really cool to be able to take trips within trips. So welcome to everybody on Facebook, on YouTube, on TikTok. If you're following the replay on this, welcome. Thank you so much for stopping by and joining us. We are talking trips within trips. And what is a trip within a trip? Well, you know, sometimes when you fly from one destination to another destination and you might have to lay over or stop over at an airport. And you're like, yeah, okay. So what's the difference between a layover and a stopover? I'm glad you asked that question. So here is the difference between a layover and a stopover. If you're flying domestic, a layover is anything less than 4 hours. A stopover is anything greater than 4 hours. If you're flying internationally, a layover is anything shorter than 24 hours 20 to 24 hours, depending which airport you're at. And a stopover is longer than 20 to 24 hours if you're flying internationally. So when you have a stopover, you can actually accomplish a little more. You don't have to stay at the airport. You could venture outside. I know when I flew back home to New Zealand on Fiji Airways, which was awesome. I had never flown Fiji Airways before. And in 2018, I was actually on a cruise ship in the Caribbean. We'd left on the 9th. And we got back into port on the 16th. And it was around the 15th, I decided I'm going to fly home to New Zealand for Christmas. And this is in December. So 15th of December, I decided I was going to fly home to New Zealand for Christmas. So I got in contact with my travel partner, who is totally awesome. It's the vendors I use all the time booking stuff to New Zealand, and said, hey, I know it's a last minute flight. What have you got for me? And they came back, and Air New Zealand direct from LA to New Zealand, and with a continuing flight onto Wellington was about $5,200. And she says, I have a flight on Fiji Airways. And if you don't mind flying Fiji Airways, I said, I've never flown Fiji Airways. What are they like? She says, it's actually pretty cool. And I'm like, okay, I trust her implicitly. I give her all the itineraries for my clients and just get her to price them. We have the hotels and, she find the hotels for me, but there's times it says that they want to go into this hotel and that hotel and do this, this, and this. And she's like, fine. And she just puts all the pricing package together for me. And she comes back and she says, okay, well, Fiji Airways, I can get you return and it'll cost you $2,600. I'm like, book it. And then I sent a note home then I finally sent a message to my parents and said, hey, you know how we're talking about doing a Zoom on Christmas Day? How would you like to do that one in person? And then I sent it and that was the email I sent. And I sent them a text message saying, hey, I just sent you an email. I need you to read right now. And Dad, you may want to turn off your hearing aids. My mother gets a little excited. Mind you, I can get a little excited as well, but my mother can get a little excited. And my mother came back and said, your father did not need to turn off his hearing aids. And I thought, yeah, he did. But we'll be very pleased to have you here. And I says, okay, well, I'm flying in and I was flying in on the 22nd. Yeah, because I got off the ship on the 16th. On the 19th, I was on a flight to New Zealand. No, hang on. 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th. Yeah, the 19th, I was on a flight to New Zealand. And I arrived 2 days later on the 21st. So just a few days before Christmas. And I said, don't tell my brother that I'm coming in. And they're like, when I said, I want to surprise him, because I hadn't done a surprise for ages. I'm the queen of surprises. I had not surprised my family in any way for a long time. I needed to do a surprise. I was burning to do a surprise. And so we did the surprise. But that completely, and it worked out beautifully. When we got to my brother's place, I'm sitting in the back of the car on the left-hand side. His house is on the right-hand side. And he comes out and Mum and Dad were already out of the car and they were at the front of the car to distract them from me walking around the back of the car. And I walked around the back and I went, hello. And my brother turned around and he immediately came over and just went whoomp, from this great big hug. His wife stood there with her mouth wide open going, She couldn't say a word. It worked out perfectly. So I was super happy about that one. But anyway, so completely sorry. So we're on Fiji Airways. We get into Nandi and get to the airport, and I'm in line to go to you had to go line up to get into the transit lounge. So I went to line up into the transit lounge, and there was this big sign up there. If your flight is in less than 7 hours, you're in this lane. If your flight is 7 hours or longer, you are in this lane and you have to leave the airport. They actually made you leave the airport if your flight was going to be, if your next flight was in 7 hours or longer. They actually made you leave the airport, and they had two people checking people into the transit lounge, and they were checking what your continuing flight was. And there was one couple ahead of me in the line that got told, I'm sorry, but you can't go into the transit lounge right now. You have to leave the airport. And they're like, why not? They go, what do you mean we're going to leave the airport? We don't want to leave our flights. And I think the flight was like 8 hours. They said anybody over 7 hours for a flight has to leave the airport. And so they weren't allowed. So they were actually checking on things because, you know, the transit lounge is really nice, and the duty-free store and all of that. And they've got great food in there as well. But if your flight was 7 hours or longer, I could totally understand that, because it was not there was not a lot of space for a lot of people to sit in that place. But you still got a lot of people in there, if that makes sense. But it was a great place for me. I love layovers because I get to people watch, and I love people watching. I love creating stories in my head about who they are and what they do. And, you know, maybe they're on some secret mission somewhere, or a COVID operator, or my brain just goes in all sorts of different directions. And I actually get some creative writing done while I'm in the airport too, because I'll go sit at a table, get something to eat, and I'll just sit there and write in my journal and talk about some of the people that I see and some of the things that I see them doing. And maybe that means this, or maybe it means that, you know, just completely make up stories about random strangers in an airport. It's quite an entertaining way to keep me entertained anyway. But the other cool part is that in my carry-on, I also had a complete change of clothing. And I forgot to bring my little wipey things. Do I have any in here? No, but I have these really cool wipes. They are literally about this big. And for those in New Zealand, they're the size of an Oddfella. If you know what Oddfella candies are, you know what I'm talking about. But they're about this big. And what you do is you unwrap it, you put it under water, and it expands to about an 8-inch square wet cloth that you can use to freshen up when you're in airports and everything. They are phenomenal. I carry them in my handbag. I carry some in the car. I have them in places if I'm going to be going. So if I've got a go bag of some sort, like my laptop bag or my backpack, or no, that's in the other room. Some backpack. No, that's over there. I have them in my handbag. So wherever I am, I always have a cloth that if I've got some water, I can just pour some water on this and use them for wipes. So I had a couple of those with me. So I just put them under the tap in the restroom and went into a stall. And they had these nice big stalls at the airport too. So you actually take your bag in there. You've got plenty of room to move around, so you can get changed. Which after a 10-hour flight, at that point, I was ready to get into some fresh clothes. And so I was able to wash down with these cloths that I had, get into fresh clothes, and then I was good to go. I was awake. I was alert. And very happy to be in some clean clothes after sitting on a plane for 10 hours. And I will tell you this, I said to Sue Ann, my contact, I said, if you can get me window seats, I would greatly appreciate that. She had me on window seats all the way down, all the way back on completely full flights. Every flight was full. There was no spare seats to be had. And remember, I only booked this the 15th of December, and I was on a flight on the 19th of December, and I got window seats on full flights. So yeah, $2,600, I think it was, return on Fiji. It was awesome. But the thing about that, with having that long layover there, having the 7 hours, and they make you leave the airport, you could actually, if you can find it in their itineraries or book it as separate flights, fly into Nandi, have a couple of days in Nandi, and then fly on to your destination if you're not on a time crunch. If you've got the time to do it, or you could do that on the way home. Just spend a couple of days on the main island there in Fiji and tour around, or just go out to the airport. We had, on our way back from Europe, we flew from Budapest to Frankfurt, from Frankfurt to Boston, Boston to LA. When we were in Boston, we had like a 8 to 9 hour layover, I think it was. And there was actually a hotel at the airport. And we didn't actually plan this, but we figured, you know, but we did have clean clothes with us. We knew it was going to be a long layover, and if there was a place that we could go and have a shower and get changed in clothes, then we were going to do that, and maybe take a nap as well. And so we found there was a hotel right there at the airport, and they just had a day price where you could go into the hotel there. That they didn't charge you an overnight fee unless you were staying overnight, but we were only going to be there for like 5 or 6 hours. And so we went to the hotel, we got showered, we got changed, we went down to the restaurant, we had a meal, then went back up to the restaurant, and we actually slept for a bit, and then got up and went back to the airport. Well, we're already at the airport. Went and got our domestic flight because we come off an international flight, then went on to a domestic flight to get home. And that was really cool. So there are times that when you have that longer layover, that they're actually really nice to break up a really long trip. Always, especially if it's going to be like a 24-hour one. There was one time I was going to be flying back home to New Zealand for my brother's wedding, and it was just going to be me going. And so I was trying to see if I could get my Air New Zealand bonus points and use them for a free flight. The only way I could do a free flight with them with my bonus points was to fly from LA to Tokyo, spend 18 hours in Tokyo, and then fly from Tokyo to Auckland direct. And I was just sort of like, okay, I'm by myself. I don't want to do Tokyo without Brad, so I'm not going to take that option. We actually managed to keep it, to do it a different way, and we were able to use the points that way. But there was economy. We couldn't do the business class. Business class on Air New Zealand is awesome. It's like first class on other airlines. They've got the lay flat seats. The seats are all herringbone, so you can sit there. You've got a table that comes up between you. You've got a ottoman on the other side that somebody could actually sit in. So you could so if you're traveling with somebody else, you can actually have dinner together because their tables are nice and big and wide enough to do that. You got this nice big 10-inch screen TV. You got all these little nooks and crannies you can put stuff in on your flight and everything else, and of course it lays flat. And even when you're coming into land or taking off, you can have your chair reclined, just not flat. You can have it reclined, and have your feet up on the footstool, so you're not having to sit with your chair upright. But you do have to have your table stowed. You do have to have the table stowed, but the chair does not have to be upright when you're on those herringbone seats, which was kind of nice. So I flew economy that time. Direct flights, but it would have been nice, if Brad was with me, we would have done the Tokyo trip. We would have gone to Tokyo for 18 hours. We just would have left a little earlier, gone to Tokyo, had the 18 hours in Tokyo, and then flown down to New Zealand from there. So there's times that you can add in these little mini trips, and there are some airlines that have stopover programs. Now, on some of the airlines, they will include a hotel if you've got a stopover, but there's always catch rules to them that your next flight has to be between, has to be departing within a certain time length from when you land to when you depart on your next flight, for you to qualify for the free hotel rooms. Some of them may include a tour of the city. So there's all sorts of different things. So when you're researching this, look to see, they're called airline stopover. Just Google what I Googled earlier. Airline stopover programs for 2024 is what I researched earlier. Some of them have some really cool layover programs. Some of them, it's just like, we'll give you a free stop there. Anything you want to do in town, you've got to pay for. So if you want to stay overnight in a hotel, you want food, all of that, it's paying for. We're just giving you that extra time in town and there's no extra cost on your flight to do that. Air New Zealand used to, I discovered today that they don't anymore, and I'm really bummed about this one. You used to be able to fly out of LAX direct to Rarotonga, which is in the Cook Islands, and then from Rarotonga onto New Zealand, and you could actually make that a stopover, or you could do it on the way back. Now, I've had clients where they've gone down, they've spent 2 to 3 weeks in New Zealand driving around on tour. Then we stop them in the Cook Islands on the way home, because this is how the time goes. So if you're going to be doing Australia, New Zealand, and the Cook Islands, this is the way you do it. You go down to Australia and do all of what you want to see in Australia. Then you pop over to New Zealand and do your bits and pieces over there. Then you get on the flight that goes to Rarotonga. And as you go, time slows down. So Australia is a little faster paced than New Zealand, not as fast as the US, but are faster paced than New Zealand. You get to New Zealand, and for me in New Zealand, I could be there a week and felt like I've been there for a month. That's how much time seems to slow down. When I was there for my brother's wedding, I was only there for 10 days, and I felt like I'd been there like a month. Brad was back in the US, and so I would be messaging him each day and all that sort of stuff. And then if you get to the Cook Islands, it's even longer. We did a familiarization trip to the Cook Islands. There was 8 travel professionals on this group. And we had a representative from Air New Zealand and a representative from the vendor who was doing the familiarization trip. And we had a fabulous time. We flew from LAX directly into the Cook Islands, although we did it the wrong way around. We spent 3 nights in the Cook Islands, and we were doing 3 nights in New Zealand. It was a very quick trip, but I will tell you this. We get to the Cook Islands on day 1. We get there, we go check into the hotel. We've got free time up until, I think it was like 11 o'clock in the morning. Our flight got in at like 7. So you had time to go and have a shower, get changed, get settled in. For those that want to take a nap, they could take a nap. When I'm working with time zones and all that, if I'm arriving at 7 o'clock in the morning, I ain't going to bed till my regular bedtime at night. Not even doing the nap thing. I will take my shoes and socks off. I will scrunch my toes in the carpet of the room. If there is no carpet available, we're at the hotel, so I was able to go out on the beach and scrunch my toes in the sand. It helps ground you and helps your body to adjust quicker to the time zones as well. And then if you're taking the no jet lag homeopathic remedies as well, which you take 30 minutes before takeoff, once every 4 hours in flight, and 30 minutes after you land. For me personally, I have no issues with jet lag. And then I have my oils, my lavender, my lemon, and my peppermint. And you put 3 drops of each into a 1 ounce glass of water. You hold it in your mouth for 30 seconds and then swallow it. So you have to make sure the oil is ingestible, and that can help reset the body time clock as well. And I do that one before I go to bed. And then I've got some unscented lotion that I put a couple of drops of lavender into it and massage that into my feet. And that just helps me at night to completely reset the body clock and wake up the next morning, and I'm perfectly fine and into a regular schedule. Just little tips along the way. So where were we? Oh yeah, we're in Rarotonga. So yeah, we're in Rarotonga. So the next day we had to be at the reception, and we did some hotel tours that afternoon. I think we did 1, 2, 3, might have been 4. We went and toured 4 hotels that evening. And the last one we did, they actually provided dinner for us that evening on the beach. Now that you got it, picture this. You're on this gorgeous, gorgeous beach. You've got the sun setting over the ocean to your, well, it was to my right. Some people their left, because we're on this table, and your feet are in the sand, and you're in the restaurant, in the bar/restaurant. All it is just there's these posts up with a thatched roof above you. They've got the fans going. There's lights in there. They've got a full bar and everything else. The floor isn't even solid. It's sand. Out in the back area where you're, and that's on the restaurant floor, behind the bar, and out in the back in the kitchen area and all of that, they've got solid flooring. But you're in there and you're sitting on the beach underneath the roof of the bar, and you've got the sun setting out there sunsetting out there, and your toes are squishing in the sand. It was awesome. And you're sitting at these tables and just having this great meal, fresh food. If you had the fish, it had been caught that day. And the food and the vegetables had been harvested from their gardens that day. I have to tell you, the food was phenomenal. It was a really great experience, and I absolutely loved it. Wherever we went and they were giving us meals, the food was always fantastic. It was fresh that day. Any fish was freshly caught that day. Vegetables fruits and vegetables straight from their gardens or orchards or the markets. And the markets are like located on the island and not far away. So fresh as possible food you could get. It was amazing. So we had to be at the office the next morning, and we flew from Rarotonga across to Arataki, which is where the big lagoon is, and where they did, the lagoon has several islands which they used for Survivor Cook Islands. And we were only going to be on that island overnight. We got on Te Waka, which is a Polynesian catamaran, and they took us off around the islands and things. And the guy, Katu was our guide that day. Man, after all these years, I still remember his name. Katu was our guide that day. And he says, oh, when did you guys get to the Cook Islands? And when did you guys get into the islands? And we're like looking at each other and was it yesterday or the day before? We honestly, the time meant nothing. We honestly could not remember if we had flown in the day, but which we had flown in the morning beforehand, but it felt like we'd been there for days. So we were all like looking at each other puzzled, going, was it yesterday or was it the day before? What did we do? You know, because we packed so much in the day before as well. So it kind of confused you a little bit. So when you get to the Cook Islands, time doesn't exist. There's a lot of clocks around the Cook Islands where the numbers are sitting along the bottom with the hands, and it's just got island time. So you got this blank face with island time written in the middle, and all the numbers are scrambled at the bottom, laying at the bottom of the clock, along with two hands for the clock, and it just says island time. They really do have an island time down there. So you can do fun experiences like this. And like I said, Air New Zealand used to do stops at the Cook Islands where you could do that either on the way back or on the way there. And it didn't cost you any extra on airfare to do that. And a lot of airlines will do that. They'll have these stopovers that you can do that. So you get to get an extra day or two in whatever city it is. And it's not going to cost you more in airfare. Now, there are other ways that you can do this. You can do, like, for example, British Airways goes through London before going onto the continent or down to into the Africa or Egypt, that sort of thing as well, before they fly on to other destinations. So you could spend a couple of days in London. Let's see, Lufthansa goes through, our Lufthansa flight went through Frankfurt. And, we could have extended the layover there in Frankfurt and gone into town for a day or gone into the city for a day or two before flying on to Prague. We couldn't do that because of the cruise line had arranged all the flights, so we couldn't do that. But we could have done that, and so look to see if an airline is from a particular country, they're going to do a stopover. They're going to do either a layover or a stopover there where you're going to have to get onto another flight to then continue on to your destination. Like if you're doing going Iceland, if you're flying Iceland Airways, they will go through Iceland and they offer a 7-day stopover, I think, if I remember correctly. From what I read earlier, there maybe is like a 7-day stopover there. So you get 7 days to explore Iceland before getting on the flight to go into your final destination for your vacation. So there's lots of different ways that you can do this with flights, and based on where the country of origin for your flight is from, you may end up having to stop in that country to change planes. So why not make it a little longer, make it a mini vacation of 1 to 2 nights where you can get out and explore the city. Just remember that you're going to have to look to see whether or not you're going to require visas. If you're leaving the airport, you may require a visa. And even if you're only there for a couple of, for a few hours or longer, if that country requires you to have a visa, you're going to have a visa. So make sure that you check that out too. Also check out to see what programs that the airlines have available for stopovers. It may also work out cheaper that you might like bunny hop using different airlines as well. So there was one, where did I write it down? So look for those airlines that have the longer layovers. And usually when you're looking at flights, they put the ones with the shortest layovers at the front, and then the time distance between your connecting flights gets longer and longer and longer as you go down. They may be cheaper. The longer the layover, or which may turn into a stayover, could be cheaper than if you had the quick flights. You could book multiple cities, like, for example, with the British Airways ones we talked about earlier. You could, that one's probably going to go into London. So you go into London there, you spend a couple of days in London, then you book another flight to take you over to Europe to something you want to see there. You spend a couple of days, say, in Paris. Maybe instead of taking, this is another thing you can do with trips within trips. You don't have to take flights all the time. You could then turn around and say, well, I want to go to Paris for a couple of days before we go on. So you land in London for a couple of days on British Airways. You then take the Channel through to Paris. You spend a couple of days in Paris. Then you get your flight from Paris to wherever you're going. Maybe it's to Cairo in Egypt. Maybe it's down to South Africa. Wherever you are going, you then take another flight from Paris across to wherever it is you're going. You spend your vacation there, and then coming back, you may just want to go straight home. So you just book as fewer programs, as fewer flights as you can to get home, with the smaller stopovers in between. So that way you can book multiple cities as well. So you don't always have to take flights. You can do other things in between. I had clients one time who had to go to south of France. And so they wanted to book flight, and they wanted the cheapest way possible to do it. Now, I happen to know this couple. They're very dear friends, and I know how much they love cruising as well. So, and they were trying to do it on air miles, but the taxes that they had to pay on the air miles was high. It came out to, it was over $1,800 per person for the taxes to do their free points flights. They had to pay like $1,800 per person. It was insane. I said, okay, let me see what I can do. So I got a little creative, knowing how much they like cruising. So what I did is I flew them from, I had the flights going from LA to London. We then did a different flight on a different airline. They got a day or two in London. We then did a different flight that would take them from London, from one of the other, not the major airports, but one of the smaller airports, across to the south of France where they needed to go. They then flew, then they were going to fly from the south of France back to London. So that was their only return flight they had. It was just on this little airline that took them across to where they were going in the south of France, brought them back to London. Then they went from London down to Southampton and we're going to get on the Queen Mary on a 7-night cruise in a balcony stateroom on board the ship and take that to New York, where they could then use and they were using their miles. We actually did it in bits. So we did LA to New York on their miles. Then they had a one-way flight from New York to London, which they paid for. Then their puddle jumper flight from their return flight from London to the south of France back to London again. Then we had their transfer down to Southampton to get on the Queen Mary to sail back to New York, where they then took a flight from New York back to LA on their points. The whole thing for all of that was less than $1,800 per person. The Queen Mary happened to have a really good sale on at the time, and it would have meant that their 10 days turned into a couple of weeks. Their 10 days turned into just over a couple of weeks because of, they had a 7-night cruise in there. And we got them for less than $1,800 per person. So less than the taxes that they could pay for this whole thing. They were ecstatic. Unfortunately, they didn't have the time. They didn't have the 3 weeks that they could take to do this trip. But it was just showing that you can be creative in how you do things, and how, taking advantage of sales that are going on with the different vendors and everything else. If you've got a flexible schedule, you can do all sorts of crazy things. You could take a flight in one direction, then take a train ride somewhere else. Then maybe you want to do like a bus tour to something else, then catch another flight and maybe put a cruise in there. You can mix and match. You don't have to just fly everywhere. You can mix and match things to your itineraries to get in what it is that you like and things like that. So there's lots of different ways that you can, and by booking one-way tickets, you can do all of this. You can even do, like when we did the package for them for the flight from LAX to New York and back to LAX again, we did it as a return flight, and they were able to use their miles for that. So there was the cost for that. And their biggest expense on using the miles was when they went international. That was where their biggest expense came in for doing that. And that's what put them over the $1,800. And I was just sort of like, they're charging you what per person? And they told me, I'm like, that's just insane. But it's because it was an international fee that was added on top, and all of that, and international taxes and everything else. It was crazy. But we got them, they would have had if they had the time, they said we would do that in a heartbeat. But we got them less than $1,800 per person. And that was return flights, LA to New York, a flight to London, return flight to the south, from London to the south of France, transfers down to Southampton, and a cruise from Southampton to New York. It was awesome. And like I said, we got a really, really good deal on that cruise. But yeah, that's one of the best ones I've ever done. But I do piece together lots of other packages and things for people as well. And I've had clients that we've flown them down to Australia. They've done the things they wanted to see and do in Australia. They then flew across to New Zealand, spent some time driving around New Zealand. Then we put them into the Cook Islands, and they said doing the Cook Islands last was the best thing ever, because they were able to kick back and relax, because the last few weeks and they were gone for 5 weeks, I think it was 4 or 5 weeks. They were gone 4 or 5 weeks. They said having that stop at the Cook Islands was the most relaxing portion. And it just sort of like, they felt like they could finally go, even though as they'd moved from Australia to New Zealand to the Cook Islands, time had slowed down for them. And they said having those few days in the Cook Islands was awesome. And then I had another client who did the Cook Islands first and then did New Zealand. And unbeknown to her, she's sitting in the airport and she's talking to these people in the airport, who it turned out later on were actually my clients who had just flown in from the Cook Islands and were waiting their flight to go to LA, to go back to LA. And she, of course, had done the Cook Islands first and then done New Zealand, and she was waiting for her flight to go back to LA. So the two of them are talking there. And of course, the couple said that they had spent this time in Australia and New Zealand, and now they'd just gotten back from the Cook Islands, and how relaxing and restful they felt, and before heading back home. And talking with them, she kind of wished she had done the same thing, done New Zealand first and then done the Cook Islands. So, you never know. But, if you're gonna travel, see it, and you've got the time to do it, see about doing a layover, a stopover in a city somewhere and just doing these mini vacations. There are tour companies out there, which cruise lines use for shore excursions as well, that will have excursions that will pick you up at the airport, take you on a tour of the city, and bring you back to the airport. And they know that you've got flight restrictions, times and all of that, so time crunches and all of that. You can even do book private tours where the driver picks you up. So if you want to go and see something, they will take you there. You get to go see it. They pick you up. They drive you off to the next destination. So you can actually pick and choose what you want with a private driver. So there is a lot of different ways that you can do mini vacations inside your main vacation if you have the time to do it, and just allow 24 to 48 hours in one place before catching your next flight onto the next one. You can actually do quite a lot during that time that you're on the ground. So if you want more information about stopovers and layers, feel free to reach out to me. You can private message me on Facebook, on TikTok, on YouTube. You can private message me that way. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot them over. We're happy to answer them for you. My question to you today is, have you done a trip within a trip? What was your favorite trip within a trip that you did? If you have done one, if you haven't done one, where is your next big vacation go? Are you going on your next vacation? And could you do a trip within a trip? I mean, it doesn't have to be international either. It could be domestic as well. If you've got a flight, say you're going from, I don't know, LA to Florida, and you've got to stop off in Charlotte, North Carolina. And you decide to spend a couple of days in Charlotte, North Carolina, or maybe it's a stopover in Phoenix here, and you want to spend a couple of days in Phoenix. Why not take the time to do that? You got time to, if you want to delay your connecting flight for a couple of days, do it. Maybe you got people in Phoenix that you would like to meet up with. Oh, we've got friends in Phoenix. Let's see if we can get a flight from LA to Phoenix. Then we'll take the flight from Phoenix to Florida. So let's see if we can do that. Maybe you're heading out to Florida for a cruise. And so along the way, you do this little stopover in Phoenix, or it could be in Chicago or Denver. I would tell you, there are some crazy flight itineraries out there. One time when we were living in Virginia, we were looking at flights to fly down to Fort Lauderdale to get on a cruise. So I'm looking at the different flights and things and the different combinations they had. They had a flight, which was the cheapest one. We did not do this. It was the cheapest one, but had we thought about it properly, this is when we first started in our travel business with cruise planners. If we had thought about it properly, we could have done this. The flight, it was the cheapest flight by like a couple of $100 per person. The flight was from Washington Dulles Airport to, in DC, Washington Dulles Airport to LA to Fort Lauderdale. And you're like, what? Yeah, they're going from one side of the country back again. It was $200 cheaper per person than flying directly from Washington Dulles down to Fort Lauderdale direct. And had we thought about it, we could have flown out to LA, spent a couple of days with family in LA, and then gotten on our flight to go to Fort Lauderdale to get on our cruise ship. We could have done that had we thought about it. But we just looked at that and went, are they crazy? But then thinking, learning about trips within trips, it's sort of like, that would be really cool if you could do things like that. There could be a flight where that takes you from LA to New York down to Florida. So why not take, 48 hours in New York, go see a show, see a couple of sites in New York, then catch a flight that goes down to Fort Lauderdale to hook you up with your cruise ship. See, crazy itineraries could actually turn out to be little gold mines, because you get to see different things along the way. You get to do different experiences and things. You've got 48 hours in New York. You could probably do a couple of shows, one show each night, see some of the sites, and then hop on your next flight down to Fort Lauderdale, getting in a day before if you are going to catch a cruise line, if you're going to if you are flying to catch a cruise ship, always, 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 always come in the day before the ship is due to leave, because if anything happens and your flight is cancelled or delayed, you have time up your sleeve to be able to go on the cruise ship. What I like to do these days, what I like to do is we actually like to fly. Brad and I used to like flying in like 2 to 3 days before the cruise. So we could spend a couple of days in town, whatever port we were in, and do some exploring and stuff like that before getting on the cruise ship. And also gave us time to kind of just chill and relax and get into vacation mode and cruising mode and all that sort of fun stuff. So on the day of the cruise, we went rushing in the night before the cruise, we were able to have a nice relaxing start to the day on cruise. You know, if you come in the day before or a couple of days before and you go see some of the sites, it's always good because you're not rushing to, oh, we're going to make the cruise. Is our flight going to get delayed? Is our flight going to get canceled? Yeah, you don't have to worry about that. If you come in a day or two before your cruise, you get to do some really cool things. We did a bus tour one time that took us into Little Havana, which is the Cuban influenced neighborhood of Miami. It was awesome. We got to get some really good food. The bus driver took us into this little gift shop. Was packed. Like, there were aisles that you could not pass people in the aisles without turning sideways and having to brush past each other. You couldn't, the aisles were very narrow. And they took us through this gift store all the way into the back where this guy made Cuban espresso for us. I tell you this, I'm not a big coffee drinker. I will drink coffee occasionally, although I am enjoying mushroom coffee, which gets put with they put mushrooms into regular coffee for health benefits and stuff. So I do enjoy my mushroom coffee every day. But this one here was espresso, and I'd always heard espresso was really strong. This was really good. And we just had it black, no sugar, no creamer in there, no nothing. And it was really, really good. So yeah, I came home with my little espresso percolator thingy mabob and a brick of coffee. So I was able to make it at home. It was awesome. So we were able to do that tour. Actually, no, sorry, we did that one after we got off the cruise ship on the way to the airport. So we'd come off the cruise ship. We booked in the tour because our flight wasn't leaving until evening time. And so we had time to do this tour in between. And then the tour bus dropped us off at the airport so we could catch our flight home. So you can do those as well. You can do excursions when you get off the cruise ship. You can either spend more time in the town, in the city that you're disembarking from, or you can, if you've always book a late flight out so that you've got time to do like a tour around the city before you go get on a cruise ship. That's another really cool way to do that as well. So because, when you get off the cruise ships, everybody's rushing to get to the airport, to get the airport on time because they've got these flights going off. The cruise line says, do not book anything before 1 p.m. We can't guarantee that you'll get there in time. And you get these people going, my flight's at 12 o'clock. I got to get moving to get through this line. Depends how quick customs is going to get you through your tour ship, boat, bus. Jeepers, your tour bus is not going to leave until you're on board because they know you're coming off the cruise ship. And so they're quite happy to wait until all of their passengers are on board. And then we take this beautiful, and he's already in the tour bus driver already had the list of who we were, what flights we were on, what time the first flight was leaving. So he knew when he had to finish his tour in time to get us to the airport for the time for the first flight that was on. And the first flight was like 5 p.m. at night. And we were off the ship. We had to be off the ship by 10 o'clock in the morning. And so we got onto the tour bus. I think it was like around 10:30 by the time the tour bus left. We had until 5 p.m. that evening to get to the airport actually a little earlier because the first flight was at 5 p.m. So 2 hours off that, 3 o'clock, we got to the airport. But we had a great tour of Miami, and especially that little Havana area. When we actually got off the bus and walked around the area, we were and just had a great time and just absorbing the culture that was there. And it was awesome. It was a really cool little after the cruise tour. And then by the time we got to the airport, we're relaxed. We're not rushing for anything. We've got plenty of time to get our bags checked in, get through security, get on the plane, go sit down and wait and get on the plane. And, it's sometimes you just got to find ways just to ease your way through things so you're not rushing. And that's another cool reason for having long layovers and stayovers is you don't rush. You just relaxed. You're on vacation. Don't rush. It takes away a lot of the worry, a lot of the stress and everything else. So that's it from me for tonight. Oh my gosh, it's almost 39 minutes. Wow. Thank you everybody for all your likes, your loves, and everything else that you have provided through this. The only announcement I have is that we've got our President's Day sale on. It is on the gift certificates again. Buy 3 hours, get 6. Buy 5 hours, get 10. You can use the gift certificates for yourself. It is just locking that price in for when you want to do research within the next 18 months. The certificates are good through the 31st of August, 2025. So you can even get them for gifts. You can get them for yourself. And, you may not be ready now, but you know that you want to do that this year. Then grab yourself a gift certificate. Just go to shop.yourfamilytreedetective.com and you'll be able to see what's included in each package. And remember, for the price of 3 hours, you get 6 hours, and for the price of 5 hours, you get 10 hours of research. And that's with us doing the work for you. You provide the information, we go and fill in the gaps and look for what it is that you're looking for. Okay, so with that, we are out of here. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. Pacific. Hei konera.